You're taking your education back. You're taking your finances back. You're taking your personal economy back. You're taking your family back. You're taking your marriage back. Taking your life back is every aspect of your life.
Hey everybody, my name is Kwame. I'm a minister at the Rock Fellowship and I'm 22 years old. Me coming up as a child, as a young kid, my parents divorced when I was 14. I actually grew up in a domestic violence home where my father literally abused my mother. I would come home, one night I came home and my mother, her neck was cut, her lips were swollen. I remember walking upstairs and seeing the whole wall just cracked from my mother being pushed in it. So I grew up in that type of environment. And so growing up in age, I had to learn to forgive my father for what he did. And that is a part of what has set me free today and has given me the freedom to become the man that I am today. Is just being able to forgive my biological father. And as far as fatherhood is concerned, God has blessed me with people in my life like Pastor Kevin Duhart. He's blessed me with people like my father-in-law that has really came into my life and has really shaped me, has been a part in really shaping and molding me into who I've become. And now, you know, I'm married. I'm young, but I'm 22. I'm married to Kwame, who right now she's a pharmacy student at the University of Incarnate Word, doing a great job. Her GPA is phenomenal, and she's a great woman. We have been married. We're going on 2 years. May 28th this year, 2013, will be 2 years that we have actually been married, and it's been great. And as of right now, I'm actually a full-time college student. This is my last semester at Northeast Lakeview. I'll be starting at Welland Baptist University in the fall, and I'll be getting my Master's of Divinity is what I'm pursuing, and my concentration is actually going to be chaplains. One thing that I can say is that when I was a young child, a young kid, I knew I was called. I just knew it. It was just inside of me. And people like my mother and people around me always affirmed that I was. But ultimately, I just knew on the inside. And I would have visions and visuals of me as a kid in ministry. But I remember there was one time when God himself spoke to me and affirmed that. And I remember I was 13 years old. And this was during the month of August. I wasn't journaling yet. I wasn't journaling at the time, so I never wrote it down. But it's always been written in my heart. And I remember I had this dream that I was in this dark alley. I was in this dark alley. And there was dim lighting, very dim light. And I remember this angel came to me. He was an angelic being. He was a Caucasian man, but everything about his being was glorious. There was nothing gray about him. He was just glorious. His hair was white. It wasn't even gray, it was just white. And he had on this all-white suit. Everything about him was just illuminated. And he came to me and he spoke to me and he asked me a question. He said, "You're a prophet of God, aren't you?" He said, "You're a prophet, aren't you?" And in the dream as a kid, I remember I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Let me show you something." And right when he said, "Let me show you something," I started to cough. And I remember I coughed up an eyeball. As I coughed up, this eyeball came out of my mouth. And, you know, an eye is symbolic of the prophetic because a prophet, of course, is a seer. They see things. And so I remember holding this eyeball in my hand that came out of my mouth. And this angel began to prophesy over my life in this dream. And I remember this angelic being telling me that I would go to the nations. He said, "You will go to nations," is what I remember him telling me. And I remember waking up and I knew I was affirmed. You know, even from knowing it as a kid at the age of 13, I knew for sure at that age that I was called to the ministry and to be a prophetic voice in this hour, to be a prophetic voice to nations and to the lives of people. Some of the things that I dealt with growing up, some of the personal things I dealt with, personal struggles. One thing that I dealt with coming up, kind of going back to high school, was fear in reference to the ministry that the Holy Spirit had prompted me to start. I would wake up in the morning with fear on me. I would wake up scared because I didn't know what people would say about me once I got there, who would come out to support, who would even listen. You know, I mean, I'm just this young 14-year-old kid. I'm short, skinnier than what I am now, you know, and I'm like, who's gonna listen to me? You know, but I would wake up with fear. But with time, as I just stepped out on faith and began to just share my faith and preach the gospel, the Lord showed me that he was with me, and he drew them. He's driven by the crowds. And so that was one thing I really just had to get over. And how I overcame the fear was faith. That's how I overcame that fear, was going against, the whispers of the enemy and what he was trying to keep me from doing, and stepping out on faith regardless of those emotions. And that faith, that boldness, it overcame it. Another thing that I dealt with growing up was low self-esteem. Now, the low self-esteem that I dealt with was rooted from my father. Simply because growing up, I grew up in a domestic violent home where my mother was vocally and physically abusive to my mother. And because of that, I had a really hard time seeing him as a role model as a child. It was hard for me to really look up to my dad. And I look just like my father. I mean, if you want to see my father, just look at me. I look just like my biological father. And because I looked just like the man that would hurt my mom or abuse my mother, I couldn't really look up to him. And therefore, when I looked in the mirror as a kid, I had a hard time accepting myself because I looked like the man that did my family so much harm. And here's what set me free. I remember one day, I was riding in the car with my mother, and there was a sister up front, a friend of my mother's from church. And this lady, she looked up in the rearview mirror, and I remember she was looking back at me. And this is what she told me. She said, "Michael," she said, "I see when you look into the mirror, you see your father. But although you look like him, you are not him." And when she told me that word set me free. Fight for Africa is my heart. That is a part of my passion, something that God really put in me. I remember visiting this place called Kibera. And Kibera is the largest slum in Africa and the second largest slum in the entire world. And while I was there, there was this one lady that came to me, and she was really talking to our group. And she said, "Please don't forget us," is what she kept saying. She kept pleading with us, "Please don't forget us." She's like, when you go back to America, make sure you tell all the Americans about us. Do not forget us, do not forget us. And I remember that day, I promised that woman, I made her a promise and said, "I promise you that I will never forget you. And that when I go back to America, I'll tell all the Americans about you." And so when I got back to America, Fight for Africa, which was once a Facebook page, actually turned into an actual nonprofit. The African people, they are just like us, believe it or not. Regardless of what you see on TV or how they're portrayed, they are just like us. And some of the first people that I met while I was there that really just impacted my life was the children. I remember I went to this orphanage, and as soon as I arrived, the young children were just standing, awaiting us, awaiting our presence. And they sung to us, they sung. And after they sung, they came and just hugged us. I mean, they just showed us immediate love. And these children, I've spoken to some of them, they have dreams of being a pilot, dreams of being a teacher. It's just the resources that many of them don't have, and the federal support from the government to actually go to school. But in these orphanages, they're really learning and being taught mathematics, being taught the Bible, being given clean water. And that generation of young people, they're really being nurtured now. But they're just like us. I remember having a conversation with a Maasai warrior. This guy is my age, killed a lion at the age of 17. This guy is incredible. His name is Joshua. And I remember he asked me, he said, "Can you sponsor me to go to school?" He's like, "I just want to go to school." And of course, I wasn't able to do that. But with Fight for Africa, I know one day we'll be able to do that. As far as what Fight for Africa plans to do, there are two initiatives that we have going on. We're going to have a local initiative and an international initiative. The local initiative is here in San Antonio, Texas. Here in this city, there's a refugee camp. If you go online, it's ssarefugee.org, if I'm not mistaken. And you have refugees from all over the world, people from India, Africa, you name it, that are in this camp. And they're trying to get reestablished. They're trying to find jobs. They're trying to learn English. They're seeking education. And they have basic needs, hygienic products and food and clothes and things of that nature. And then internationally, it's going to be in Kenya. And on the international scope, we're actually going to be aiding the areas that I visited. We're going to be aiding slums. We're we're going to be aiding orphanages. We're going to be aiding hospitals and providing medical needs, you know, providing food, providing clothes, providing backpacks, providing textbooks for children, providing things for schools. So we're going to be doing those things and really just empowering them on a social, on an academic, on an intellectual, and even on a spiritual level. One of my goals this year of 2013 is to get back to Africa as of this August. That's my goal. And when I go, I actually want to do some recording, because what I want to work on while I'm there is like an endorsement video. And I want to take you guys on a journey with me. As I go, I want to record some things and have you guys meet Pastor Peter, have you guys actually see some of the orphanages that I'm actually visiting, so that you can kind of have a general idea of where funds will be going, where resources will be going once we begin the campaign work. I've been hit in life, I have, by many different things. And so when life hits me, or if I'm discouraged, or if I'm down, or if I feel under pressure, other than prayer, of course everybody says to pray, and that's one thing I do is, yes, I do pray. But outside of just praying, or maybe talking to my wife, or reading the Bible, one thing that I've done that's really helped me is write. You know, when I write, that's just a way of me communicating my emotions. And sometimes when I look back at my journals, I see tear stains. And those were times when I was just writing, and I may have been discouraged, and my tears hit that paper and fused with that pen, or fused with that pencil. And those markings, those teardrops just remind me of where I was at that time. And writing, you know, when you write, it's just like you're just releasing yourself, you're releasing your emotions, and it's another form of communicating to God. One thing that I'm also working on right now is actually my book. It's called Diary of Kenya, and basically each day that I'm there is its own chapter. So I'm journaling every day, really writing my experience. Some of it is poetry, and some of it is just me writing. When the purpose of this book is to help raise awareness to some of the social issues and things that are going on in Africa, so that people are aware. And once this book hits the market, of course proceeds will go to Fight for Africa to further its work. Within the next 5 to 10 years, I know for sure I will have my Master's of Divinity and/or Theology, working toward my PhD. And what I plan to do with that degree is actually move into chaplaincy. As of right now, I'm actually doing some volunteer work. I'll be starting volunteer work next month at Northeast Methodist, working with the chaplains, doing pastoral care. So for a while, you know, once I get my degree, I'll be just more than likely a hospital chaplain, really visiting patients, praying for patients. And one reason why I chose the hospital is because I want the hospitals to see God's power. That's really what it is. When I go there, when I'm working with these hospitals, visiting the sick and the dead, I pray that God would raise the dead. I pray for people to be healed. So that's the field that I really believe God has called me to in reference to chaplaincy. As far as my wife and I, you know, 5 to 10 years, within the next, by that time, I'm sure we'll probably be talking about children, or we taking it slow as children. We taking our time, but within the next 5 to 10 years, I'm sure, I'm 22, so yeah, I'll be 32 within 10 years. So I'm sure I'll have a child or two by that time, or working toward one. I know for sure we'll have our home, and I know that we'll be really, we'll have our hands in investments. We'll be investing in a lot of things and really creating residual income, probably have a business or two going. I know for sure my book will be out. I may have even 2 books on the market by that particular time. And ministry-wise, I pray to be traveling more is my goal, to be doing more traveling on an international level. Chaplaincy is really what I'm going to be, it's ministry, but I'm really going to be doing that until God really releases me internationally. And so I pray to be traveling more. It's my goal, my dream, to be traveling more and sharing the gospel in America, but more so even overseas, internationally. So within the next 5 to 10 years, you know, really wrapping up my degree, and really, that's really going to be the beginning, I feel, of really getting established with my wife and really getting established, and really, by that time, I think I'll really be moving into destiny.